The Korean band BTS popularized this book. They named one of their album Map of the Soul, and it's based on Jungian psychology.
I'd like you to read a message from the BTS album.
One day we woke up and we were like, where are we? When you don't know where to go, I think the best way is to walk down the road you have been walking on. The reboot, songs is the best way to reflect ourselves and figure out ourselves again.
Do you think when BTS wrote this album, they were experiencing some sort of existential crisis? Today we have an amazing guest, Winston, who is in the field of psychology. With over 10 years in private practice, his journey spans roles as a mental health consultant with the United Nations, a visiting consultant at NUS, and a former special ops officer. Winston's diverse background offers unique insights into the mind, healing, and personal transformation. In the Map of the Soul album, I think one part is got to do with this idea of a shadow concept.
We all have a shadow. We all have a dark side. When we are not careful, we're not aware of ourselves, we are not aware of that shadow, it comes up. The whole idea is to be aware. There's a Chinese saying, right? Why do I keep falling for the same type of guys? Or vice versa, right? A lot of these things are in the unconscious. If we don't make the unconscious conscious, we just say that
it's fate.
At the end of the day, there's free choice, there's free will. The unconscious may highlight to you certain things that's happening in your life to bring to your awareness. When you're aware, it's up to you to make the choice.
How do you process it then? Is it just thinking about it or letting your emotions flow? How do you process it? Welcome to the Man on a Mission podcast, where we interview founders and visionary leaders who are passionate about serving their people. Today we have an amazing guest, Winston, who is in the field of psychology, right? Something that a lot of Singaporeans love to talk about, including the Grab taxi driver, right? Welcome, Winston, to this podcast. Winston, could you share with us your mission?
So my name is Winston, and my mission is to make depth psychology, and more specifically, Jungian psychology, known in Singapore, or rather get the word out there, and so that individuals can use this to make meanings in their life.
In this episode, we dive into depth psychology with Winston, exploring self-existential themes inspired from BTS album, The Map of the Soul, and how existential crises affect our sense of self. We'll also discuss breaking life patterns, the power of the mind in healing, and the role of creativity in personal transformation. So today, Winston is here to share with us some tips and strategies, as well as his perspective on existential crisis.
Thanks, Tammy, for having me today. So I'm a psychotherapist and in private practice. My specialization or my interest is in Jungian psychology, or in layman terms is called depth psychology. And why depth? Because we need to go inwards and deep enough to find out what are issues. So when we talk about existential crisis, when we see a psychologist or when we see a psychiatrist or a counselor, is usually a trigger that brings us there, or rather to bring a client there. But it's important for us then to go in deep to see what are the root causes. And in depth psychology, we are able to do that.
I see. It's very interesting because we talk about Carl Jung, right, which is this book, right? Is there a reason why you brought this book along?
Yes. So the title is called Jung's Map of the Soul. It's written by a renowned Jungian analyst, Dr. Murray Stein. And why this book? Because the Korean band BTS, popularized this book because they named one of their album Map of the Soul, and it's based on Jungian psychology.
Yeah, and I believe the album is award-winning, won many awards all over the world.
That's right, yeah.
So I think, to understand something complex is usually easier to reference pop culture, right? That's why I think today we want to reference the Map of the Soul album a bit more, right? To understand from how they express it through music, what is depth psychology really about? So I'd like you to read a message from the BTS album, if you could.
Sure.
Here.
Okay. And it says here, many things were not intended as far as our career. We didn't know we would ever reach this kind of position. One day we woke up and we were like, where are we? When you don't know where to go, I think the best way is to walk down the road you have been walking on. So the reboot, songs is the best way to reflect ourselves and figure out ourselves again. Where are we? What are we doing? Who we were in the past and who we are right now. That's how it all happened.
Very interesting. What do you think the message is saying?
I think it's important to make sense in every stages of our life. So our past is also equally important because our past determines or defines us. But as we go forth in the different seasons in our life, we also need to make sense of us becoming those new versions of ourselves.
Do you think when BTS wrote this album, Map of the Soul, they were experiencing some sort of existential crisis?
Possible. I mean, if you look at it,
Yeah.
it could be questioning about where to go next. You know, the fame and the popularity that they've gotten. And I think there's also a time for them to maybe just to check in where they are. I don't think it's just the career, but also themselves as a identity as a group, identity as artists, identity as individuals.
That's so interesting. It feels very relatable, and to know that even pop celebrities at their peak of their career, where they are known globally, also experiences the same issues as we do, right? Which is to check in and understand where we are right now. Yeah. Do you find a lot of young adults that you work with these days also having questions like that for themselves?
Yes, it's very common because anxiety is a very common condition that we see these days in the space of mental health. But if you look at it, anxiety, depression, these are all more like symptoms. No one is born with anxiety overnight, or anxiety doesn't develop over 2 weeks, right? But when someone is anxious, usually as we explore a little bit further, it's about the questions about the unknown, right? Am I going to be in this job? What is my career going to be like? Am I going to meet someone? Am I going to have a family? Questions, big question mark about their lives.
And because they do not have the answers to this question, is that why they experience certain anxiety issues or even depression?
So some may not have the answers yet, but also there isn't that anchor, so we all need to have, we're like ships, we're sailing, we're on a journey. But there are some points in our lives we also need to anchor, right? To refuel, to replenish, to recharge. And those anchors are important to keep ourselves stable. So when the storms come, we are stable. We are not affected by the storms. So when someone doesn't have a safe anchor or an anchor enough in their lives, they get swayed, right? So the uncertainty of lives, the difficulties of lives, obstacles, then that creates anxiety in people.
So a symptom of getting swayed is when you don't have a strong anchor and a strong, I would say, fundamental stability. Therefore, you feel anxious for some reason because there's nothing for you to hold on to.
That's right. Yeah. You don't know who am I. My identity is not formed properly.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know my identity. That identity is based on maybe my popularity, my career, my studies. I'm a good sports person, but who am I really? Right. We need to find that identity.
Let's explore some themes in the Man of the Soul album, right? Because I watched some of their music video. I'm sorry, I'm not a BTS army, right? But I do appreciate their music. So I watched some of their music video and I was very interested in some of the visuals that they express themselves with, right? I think one part is got to do with this idea of a shadow concept, right? Where there is almost like a yin and a yang, right? Where he shows, okay, on one hand, in front of the public eye, right, is this very composed, confident person. But when he goes back, right, goes back home or in a more private setting, it's a totally different person altogether, right? Yeah. So what can we understand by this shadow concept?
Yeah. So this idea of shadow in Jungian psychology says that we all have a dark side. We all have a shadow, right? But when we are not careful, we're not aware of ourselves, we are not aware of that shadow, it comes up. So the whole idea is to be aware. And when we are aware, we can better make sure that the shadow side of us is in check.
So is it like those movies where you see there's an angel sitting on the left shoulder and devil sitting on the right shoulder.
Well,
And they're the
something
angel and
along that
devil.
line. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you want to put it into context, something along that line. Yeah.
And how does the shadow behave?
Like, for example, a person is not someone who has a bad temper, right? He projects himself very professional, right? In front of people he wants to please or to impress. But then when it comes to this person's subordinate or someone that may be of a lower status, all right, the shadow comes out. Things like maybe talking down, things like maybe, showing the proud side of them, just being nasty. So we say that the shadow side has come out.
I see.
Of this person.
And is it necessarily a contrast, or all these different personas forms our identity? How should we understand this?
So it's not all these different personas forms our identity, but it's making sense of all these other concepts and things. So things like a persona. So persona is basically, we put on a persona.
Yeah.
It's like a mask that we wear. So for example, if I'm meeting a head of state, or I'm meeting someone who's very important, I put on a persona. But that doesn't mean that is the real me. So the whole idea and the key thing is who am I really when no one is looking? So we can put on different personas. So if I'm a teenager, I put on a persona in front of my teachers. I want to be the teacher's pet. I want to be the best student. In front of my friends, I want to be the cool kid. I put on a different persona. But then when I'm at home, right, and because of all this need to impress people, this need to be that person that I'm not, my shadow tends to then come out at home.
I see.
Because I don't need to put on a persona. Then I project those negative emotions onto people that are close to me, my family members, my parents. Yeah.
And is it a sort of repression? Because we always have to put on a front in front of others, in front of society. But when we go back, the shadow kind of comes out, right? So is that our natural state, and are we repressing it?
Repression is a depth psychology concept as well. But repression happens when, let's say, someone goes through a very traumatic past or a very, very bad experience, and the person doesn't want to be reminded or to live through the experience again. So what they do is they involuntarily don't remember. All right. So repression is what we call unconscious. Unconscious means it's not in our cognition. Yeah, it's not in our consciousness, right? And there are things that we repress. So let's say, for example, maybe I grew up in a very difficult family environment. My father was abusive. This is just an example, right? And then I repress those emotions. I repress those feelings. But you see, the thing about repression is that things that you repress will surface at some time of our lives.
I see. And how does that usually surface?
Sometimes it could be, different triggers. So it could be a very bad relationship, a difficult work environment, a huge setback, business failure, different setbacks in our lives. And then we get things that were repressed, will then start to surface or come out.
Is it in a bad, negative way where we start to act out?
Yeah, usually it's a bad, negative way.
What are some examples?
But the thing about repression is a unconscious way of protecting ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? So what our psychologically will do, our body will do, is that because it's so traumatic or it is so unpleasant, we forget or we repress. But the role is basically to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if we don't process it, we don't work on it, all right, it then becomes things that will surface in a negative way.
How do you process it then? Is it just thinking about it or letting your emotions flow? How do you process it?
That's why in that psychology, we say when we work with our clients, the process is called analysis. All right. So we analyze, we look at issues. So it's not just to fix the problem, or rather we don't fix, but we try to help clients make sense. So an example would be, let's say a client had a very traumatic experience growing up, and then this client goes into a relationship. But the unhealthy things surface in this relationship, but the client doesn't know what's going on. Right? So it could be a traumatic past, but that has been repressed and forgotten.
Yeah.
So in analysis, all right, we help clients to bring up these things. We talk about these things. And in analysis, in therapy, usually those things that are repressed will usually come back.
I see. So you analyze it, you help us make sense of it so that we reconcile with it.
Yes.
And when we start to bring it from subconscious to conscious,
Unconscious to conscious. Yes, that's right.
Unconscious, conscious, then that's when we can recover from it.
So Jung has this very famous quote, and Jung said this, unless we make the unconscious conscious, we will just say that it is fate. F-A-T-E. I'm fated to be in this relationship, right? I'm fated to meet this type of guys.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why there's a Chinese saying, right? 男人不坏,女人不爱. Right? Why do I keep falling, right, for the same type of guys? Or vice versa, right? The guys may only go after a certain type of girls.
Yeah.
But a lot of these things are in the unconscious. Right? So if we don't make the unconscious conscious, we just say that, oh,
it's fate.
It's fate. This is my life.
That's a very interesting, very deep quote there, right? Because we will think that it is some sort of fate that we are going through, but really what's happening is a pattern of behavior that continues over and over again when we haven't reconciled with something that has happened in the past.
That's right.
Yeah. So only by being able to be conscious about it that we can change and maybe seek a better relationship.
Yeah.
And give our chance.
So the client has to work on it. So it's a lot of hard work in analysis or in therapy, a lot of hard work. So there are cases, of course, the clients are not willing to go there because it's very painful.
Yeah.
Yeah. But necessary.
Necessary.
Yeah.
No, you talked about personas earlier, and I thought that was a very interesting conversation because in every social setting, naturally as human beings, we put on certain personas, right, to form certain impressions because we want to be favorable in people's eyes, right? But when we go home, that's when the shadow comes out. So how do we reconcile that differences? Because on one hand, Tammy in the social setting is very extroverted and, very, very sociable and love to speak to people. On the other hand, Tammy at home is an introverted self and just want quiet time, right? So how do we reconcile the difference in our identity?
Yeah. So I won't say that it's unhealthy to have personas, right? Yes, we need to have a certain front, right? Or a certain type of presentation in various settings. But then it becomes a problem when we don't have an identity. When those personas take over, when those personas start to define us. So I'm no more Winston. So like, for example, you know that you are an introvert, right? Right? You treasure your own personal space. But when you're out there, when you are doing your work, when you enjoy meeting people, it is your extroversion side coming out at play, right? And you're well aware of it. And that is a healthy situation.
Yeah.
So unhealthy would mean that the person allows the persona to take over. Right?
So because of that, you are kind of forced to live that persona.
Correct.
Which is a position that you don't want to be in.
That's right.
Fundamentally.
Yeah.
I see.
That's why there are a lot of examples where celebrities, they fall from fame or when they can't cope with the fame, all right, or the attention. And you see them, not doing well in their career. And that will also affect their personal life.
Yeah.
There are many, many examples.
And that's when the topic of mental wellness then starts to come in.
That's right.
Because in society, we are pressured by a lot of things, right? Whether it's academics, whether it's career success, even social success, so on and so forth, right? And do you feel that this understanding of multiple personas and who you are as a true self is the answer to solving issues like depression or anxiety?
That is one way. That is one way of because analysis or that work it's a process. I always tell clients that come and see me that it is a process. I'm not here to fix a problem for you, but it's a process. But when you go through the process, you start to make sense of things, you will have the necessary resources and tools to tackle the problems that you have. Yeah.
I think International Mental Wellness Day, right, just happened a few days ago.
That's right.
Right? There must be a reason why somebody from somewhere with authority created this Mental Wellness Day, right? So on this day, what should we be reminded of? Because to me, as a person who don't study mental wellness enough, I'll think, oh, just another cool day, right? Yeah. So what should we be reminded of?
Yeah, because the term mental wellness covers a lot of things. It's just like a big umbrella that covers many things under that space of mental health. But I think for me, it's what sits with me more is for individuals to have to find answers lah. Yeah, right. So I can be an advocate for mental health. I can say that we need to give people with mental illnesses more, or rather be more understanding to them, champion mental health. But sometimes there's just too much noise, I feel.
Yeah.
Right? We are creating programs, we are offering a lot of services, which, yeah, we're heading towards the right direction. But then there's so much noise out there. Sometimes clients or people who needs help, they don't know where to go to.
Yeah.
Right. But for me, I feel that work or depth psychology should have more emphasis. Our system or our society, not just in Singapore, I don't think we pay enough attention to depth psychology work.
And the understanding of finding answers.
Yes, or making meanings in our life. Yeah, but I'm not saying that a client that goes and that doesn't do analysis or depth psychology work with a practitioner may not find answers. That's not what I'm referring to. Yeah, they will find answers, but also it depends on the complexity of the issues or what kind of problems the clients have.
And whether they are really going deep enough into their unconscious realm, right, to form new habits and form new paths in their lives. Right, I think that's the importance of it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We talked about fame earlier, celebrity and fame, right? And of course, attributing to the Map of the Soul album by BTS, right? How does depth psychology explain the emotional toll that one would have from achieving external success versus the feeling disconnected with their inner self? Right? How does depth psychology explain that emotional toll on a person?
When you find that you have to constantly be someone that you're not, or you lose certain sense of who you used to, and you dread doing what you're doing, then those are signs, those are symptoms that something is not right. Interestingly, yesterday on social media, I came across this article. A Singapore celebrity graduated from Bible school. So what she did was she just stepped away from the limelight.
Yeah,
and she took 3 months and just went to do something different. And she enrolled herself in the Bible course, but that was her way of just stepping away from the pressure, the demands of the industry.
Yeah.
And I think there was just a lot of negativity out there, and she lost certain identity along the way. So she decided that, I will just step away from this and find meaning. Right. So a person can find meaning in different things as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I believe the public sometimes can be quite unforgiving and judgmental, thinking, oh, maybe this celebrity is not doing well in a career, therefore she wants to do something else and make money from that perspective, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But I think from what you shared with me as well, stepping away sometimes is actually beneficial. Right? So what examples can we have? Of course, we'll go into tips and strategies later. But what are some examples of people that you have seen step away and manage to gain something great out of it?
So one interesting story that I would share with my clients is this person who was interviewed during COVID. I think a CNA did a program about like the COVID champions, a documentary about people who, with innovation, they came up with things, to contribute to the fight against COVID during that period.
Yeah.
And there was this person who came up with, I think, some thermal instrument that could measure temperature.
Thermal scanner.
Yes, yeah, and he shared, in his story that he went into many startups, so he wanted to do many things.
Yeah.
And he reached a stage where it was just constantly failure. He was just constantly experiencing failure. Every project or every startup that he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And he decided to step away. And what he did was he went fishing.
Fishing.
Yeah. And
So
he went
random.
fishing every day. He went fishing every day.
Okay.
Right? And he said that his friend, who had then this idea, but needed him to join him and wanted him to join him, had to look for him and said, stop fishing, all right, and come back.
Yeah.
And that was how then they came to have this
Wow.
successful project.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the pattern that I'm seeing here is if you are stuck with something and you feel like you're in a loop, maybe if you knock yourself against the wall multiple times and then you realize that something is not correct. How is it that it feels that there's no flow?
Yeah.
It feels that things are constantly failing
I'm
around
no
me.
more passionate about this thing that I'm doing.
Yeah.
My energy level is low. I'm more critical. I get triggered very easily. These are signs to look out for that. Do we need to step back and reevaluate and look at, okay, what are we doing? All right. Do we have enough bandwidth to go on the extra mile? Things like that.
Yeah. And when you talk about stepping away, is it going fishing? Like what forms of stepping away are we looking at?
Yeah. I mean, so very common, you hear people going on sabbatical, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
sabbatical.
people say they just go on sabbatical, go 1 year sabbatical. And I think that's good because I hear a lot of these examples, or rather people that I know who are in the helping profession. So the helping profession are professions where they are either in social work, counseling, psychology, so they work with clients,
Yeah.
or those who are in teaching, those who work with human beings, right? And when they go on sabbatical, they try out other things.
Yeah.
Go and learn a new hobby, go and travel, do something, but not what you are currently doing. So stepping away, and I think that is good because then there is that pause, there is that break just to reevaluate.
And does it necessarily have to be 1 year period or?
No, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to.
So what would you recommend?
It's really up to the individual, but not 3 days lah. Not go to JB and shopping and staycation. That's not a good sabbatical. But at least 6 months, to a year. I think that would be something that it gives you enough time to go and try new things, to explore things. Yeah, I think that would be good.
We hear a lot of social stigma against youngsters or young adults taking gap year. They don't want to finish university and they feel like, I feel a bit lost. And they want to take a gap year. But a lot of people will frown upon that and say, hey, you're already 2 years in. Why don't you just complete your studies, right? So what's your perspective when it comes to taking gap year for undergrads?
Yeah. So sometimes I work with young adults or university students and they tell me, Winston, I'm thinking of going for a gap year or taking a leave of absence, or I've done gap years before. That's why I'm a little bit slower in my studies.
Yeah.
And I usually say that it may not be, or rather it's not necessarily a bad thing. Because that time away also gives you the opportunity to just reflect, right? There must be a reason why the person feels that I need a break. There must be a reason. Then I think it's important to attend to why the reason is there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is it the fact that young adults are less resilient? Because in the past, in our parents' era, right? We have not heard about gap years, right? They'll say, wow, what gap year? When I graduate, I need to start working ready to feed my family, right? But more so in this day and age, we hear a lot of young adults taking gap years, right? So do you think it's a trend, right? And to what extent do we say that, oh, the young adult maybe is not resilient enough, feel like need a break? Yeah. So how do we draw that line?
Yeah. So maybe firstly, for us we can't compare our young people to, generations before, right? Different challenges. I think the generations before was really a lot more on surviving, maybe only one parent is single income.
Yeah.
Right? So parents would then expect their children to finish education fast, so that you can start working. So it was really a lot about bread and butter issues, surviving.
Survivability.
Yeah. But now our young people, I think, yes, the bread and butter issues are still there, but they're a lot more aware, right? They're a lot more aware, or rather, because of social media, they're a lot more informed, right? So the way they think, the way they look at their future, the way they decide on things, they're also very different. So, for example, I rather look for a job that gives me passion, gives me meaning, right? Rather than looking for a job that pays me the highest salary.
Yeah. And I think a lot of youths are like that these days, right? They call it the corporate slaves, I mean, generically put, I'm not saying that all companies are bad, right? But they have this term like that. And of course, I work with youths as well. I have a youth community that I'm taking care of. There is also the phenomenon of what they call tang ping or bailan.
Yes.
Right, which is they find no meaning. They just do the bare minimum and they live their days like that, right? So would you say, what's the issue here for these youths?
I think it also could be that there's just so much expectations, right? And then that creates that for the young people, that creates that feeling of, I don't want to try, or I just feel that I may not meet those expectations. So I just do what I feel like is right, what I'm just able to do, and what I want. So I think that perception has changed, yeah.
I see. Let's talk about the older folks, right? I mean, you keep talking about youth. I think, yes, it's very important to understand as well. But how about for my parents' generation, right? They are the generation where they are semi-retired or they are going into retirement. And we see a lot of sense of loss among adults like that as well, because that's the age where their kids have moved out of the house. So last time it used to be, I have to cook for my kid. I have to make sure that they are, well taken care of. Everything's about them, right? But then suddenly when the kids move out, then, what am I going to do? Right? I feel a bit lost. So much so that we speak about the topic of retirement and how they are not retiring well, right? So in your experience, do you see a lot of elderly folks like that?
Yes, I mean, I do have clients who are of the older generation, but I've also seen many examples of cases where they reach a stage where they cannot navigate, away from that crisis. Again, like what I previously said, we have different seasons, and that doesn't mean that when you reach your old age, when you're considered senior citizen category, you don't have any more crisis. You have. Right, so very good examples like what you mentioned about retirement, emptiness, children leaving or children not staying with them anymore. So for example, a person who doesn't retire well could be, a person is so identified with their role, their work, and when they're no more in that role, they don't know who they are anymore. Right, so for me, personally, some people tell me, Winston retire by 40, Winston retire by 50. I think that's good. if you're planning for a new season in your life, that means you may have a new project, you may have a new startup, or there's something you want to do.
Yeah.
Right? But to retire and not do anything, I think that's not a good formula lah.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
That's a very good point you brought up, right? Because usually when people think about retirement is, I want to quit this thing. But they don't really think about what's ahead for them.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the planning of the quitting is way more robust
That's right.
than the planning of the entering into something.
And I also would think that, and not just I would think, but there are also truth in this, is that those who sometimes retire, not by choice, right? So there are circumstances, and then they have to leave that role. Then those individuals will fall into the category of not retiring well. So they become quite bitter. They're more inward looking. And then you find that relationships are affected, or they may do things that are more negative.
Yeah. Do you have any examples?
Yes. I mean, I work with clients where the parents have retired early. And then as I process with them in sessions a bit more, because the client presented with symptoms of anxiety, then as I process with the client a bit more, then I found out, the anxiety is actually from the expectation of a parent at home.
Oh.
Right. So this parent expects my client to be, Chinese they say 随传随到啦. So if I call you, pick up your phone.
Yeah.
All right. And if the client is in class or is engaged, this parent will constantly call my client.
Oh.
And then as I navigate, or rather as I process further with this client, then, I found out that the parent didn't actually retire well. So the parent was in a very, very good job, I think was doing very well. And then certain things happened and the parent went for an early retirement.
Yeah.
Right. So don't have very good supportive social circle.
Yeah.
The only people that this parent is in contact with is the son and then the spouse. So this parent doesn't go out, doesn't hang out, doesn't go and meet friends for lunch and all.
Yeah.
So that is an example of a person not retiring well. And it affects your immediate family members. Yeah.
That's very interesting, right? Because I met a lot of founders, business owners, where they are at the age where they are actually very financially stable. But when it comes to retirement, I mean, it's a once again a social construct, right? To do well in life, you need to exit your company, and by then you have a lot of money and can do whatever you want, right? But out of the friends that I have, I spoke to two of them regarding retirement. Both of them went back into the business. So they exited, right? They sold some shares. And then after that, they're like, what am I going to do? I feel very bored. So what they did was they bought some shares back and they went back to the company.
Right.
Yeah. So I think this relates a lot on what we are talking about here, because once again, the exit is planned really well, right? But what's in store for this person is not being thought out carefully. Yeah. And how do you get answers then from debt psychology? Let's say if a person really wants to have a new season in life, right? And they want to exit their current job.
So in debt psychology or in analysis, we'll process the reasons for wanting exit, right? Or what is that change that they're looking to see?
Yeah.
Or even if there is a change, what does the change look like? So we'll process through and then we make sense the present, what's currently happening.
Yeah.
Why do you want to exit? Why the change? Right. So it could be a financial reason. I made enough money, I can just exit now. Then we need to process the past. Right. So the two examples could be, this is my baby, right? This company, or I've seen this baby grown from, a small outfit to where it is today.
Yeah.
So it's part of me. That's why I'm not surprised they bought shares and they went back again, to work in the organization. I'm not surprised. So then we have to make sense of all these things. Because sometimes Not sometimes, in most times, clients are not aware.
Yes.
So when we say they're not aware, it's happening in the unconscious. So in-depth psychology and analysis is we're trying to make those things in the unconscious conscious.
So that they can find themselves again
That's
and
right.
obtain answers. Even if it might not be the final destination, at least they have something to help them move along. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was thinking in my head and I was joking about it. I think you can help with retirement planning and career advice, right? Because the funny thing is we are always outwardly seeking answers. So we try this, we try that, point A, point B, okay, doesn't work, move on. But rarely do we think about seeking answers from within, right? Which I think in your case, that's what you're saying about depth psychology.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
So in analysis work or in depth work, when I work with a client, right, it is not I see you once a month. It has to be constant. It has to be consistent. Then with consistency, then you will see results. With consistency, then it is more obvious, right? Because if you go for therapy just once a month, you just get a glimpse of what's going on. Yeah.
So those are the more impatient ones that wants to get fast answers, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that's right.
Amazing. Well, in the next part, right, we'll be talking about MBTI, right, and a bit about Winston's past. If you guys didn't know, right, he's actually a painter and artist.
Yes.
And there's always something new to learn about being in the creative industry as well. So stay tuned.